Welcome, everyone. My name is Rebecca Smith Aldridge, and I am the co-founder and board president of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and principal author of the Sustainable Library Certification Program. And we're thrilled to have you here tonight for our quarterly webinar series. This quarter, we're focusing on libraries for health and well-being. And I'm going to be introducing our speakers tonight in just a moment, but we're thrilled to have them with us. And I'm about to tell you why. Because here at the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, we've learned from the over 100 libraries in our Sustainable Library Certification Program about patterns that are emerging for libraries to be sustainable in the face of climate change and the other myriad of challenges that our communities are facing. So as we start to think about the United States and what we're talking about in terms of public health challenges, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a report earlier this year noting that after climate change as the #1 global threat to public health, right after that is loneliness and isolation in the United States. And as we start to think about the role that libraries play in our communities, we can understand the very central role we play, not only in public health, but just general well-being. And as we can see in some of the talking points from the Surgeon General's report, this is a very serious health issue in the United States. This one talking point alone from the report certainly caught my attention, that lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, which, as we all know, is very, very bad for your health. And so as we look at the recommendations from this very important office in our country that is not normally thinking about libraries, we finally saw a federal agency mention libraries when they didn't have to, because they recognize the social pillars that are necessary to have healthy communities. And as we look at the 6 strategies that were presented earlier this year by the Surgeon General, you can see in areas 1 and 6, it just screams libraries. So as we start to talk about the importance of libraries, we need to be integrating talking points about social well-being into why libraries matter for our communities today and into the future. So our 4 attributes of sustainable libraries as identified by our libraries in the certification program speak to this issue as well. These are our 4 attributes of sustainable libraries that we've identified through the Sustainable Library Certification Program: living with authenticity and living our values out loud from the inside out, treating our library workers well, making sure our policies are actually welcoming and inclusive, and actually thinking about people at the center of our service design, not just stuff, right, and technology. The second one is really what we're here to talk about tonight, the importance of being a catalyst for civic participation and social cohesion in communities. And the work that the librarians in the State Library of Victoria have done on this topic is truly impressive, and giving the library community something we've never had before, which is hard data that demonstrates the value we bring on what often people think of as kind of amorphous and unmeasurable. But now we've got some information that shows it is measurable and it's making a difference in people's lives. Of course, you're used to hearing us talking about climate change mitigation and adaptation, and we've got plenty of upcoming events that are going to address that tonight. But today we're here to focus on this idea of people at the center of the work that we're doing and designing for the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 2 speakers tonight, which we're very excited to have here with us. We have Jackie Horwood, the head of library sector engagement for the State Library of Victoria in Melbourne. It's quite early there today, so thank you very much for being here. And Georgina Earle, the unit manager library services for Marybeck City Council. So we're thrilled to have you here today to hear more about the work you've been doing, the outcomes you're seeing, and to really, I think, lay out for an American audience what you have learned through your experiences, thanks to being really focused on this topic. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Questions are welcome in the chat box. We'll take those after the presentation here this evening.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm just going to share my screen and I'll get started. Okay, everyone can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Hi, as Rebecca said, I'm Jackie. I'm Jackie Horwood, and I'm presenting with my colleague Georgina. Thanks for having us here. We're really excited to speak to you tonight, or this morning in our case. On behalf of State Library Victoria, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands of all the Victorian Aboriginal clans and their cultural practices and knowledge systems. We recognise that the State collection holds traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and around the country. We support communities to protect the integrity of this information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, who have handed down these systems of practice to each new generation for millennia. And I extend that welcome and that respect to Indigenous elders in the room here today. I'm sitting on Wiradjuri land at the moment. So, Georgina and I, why is my slide not moving down? Sorry, I can't move my slide down. Sorry. I'm going to provide the context from which this research and work has come from. I'll let you know how our partnership between State Library and public libraries works. I'll take you through how we developed our strategic framework, and then Georgina will take you to all the work that fell out of the framework, including the research that gives data. So both of us are coming to you from Victoria, which is in Australia. So where is Victoria? This is a map of Australia. I'm sure you're quite familiar with it. Captain Cook got here in 1788, but Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have been here for over 60,000 years. They're the oldest continuing living culture in the world. The little pizza slice down the bottom, the brown one, that's Victoria, and the little dot, red dot, is Melbourne, and that's our capital city. So each state and territory in Australia has their own Premier or Chief Minister, and Victoria's Premier, Dan Andrews, is on his third term, so he's been in leadership for a while. And if you sort of thought of it on a one-to-one basis, he's a Democrat. This is a map of Australia close up. And Victoria is the second smallest state in terms of land mass, but it's the second largest after New South Wales, and it's a bit on top of us in terms of population. So we're a populous state. There's 6.5 million people in the state of Victoria, but 5.2 million of those live in the metropolitan Melbourne area, and that's at Orange Park. So the bulk of our population is squished together in that small orange space, and that the body of water it circles is called Port Phillip Bay. The rest of the land mass we refer to as rural and regional Victoria. 41.3% of Victorians have parents who are born overseas. 4% of those people are from India, 2.7% from England, 2.6% from China, and 1.5% from across the ditch in New Zealand. Nearly a third of households use a language other than English, predominantly Mandarin at 3.4%, but also large groups of people who speak Vietnamese, Greek, and Punjabi. And both those percentages, having parents who are both born overseas or speaking a language other than English in the household, they're both higher than the Australian average. So we're a very multicultural state. 1% of Victorians identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, but that's well below the Australian average of 3.8%. The squiggly lines you see on the map denote our local government areas, and I guess they're like the counties. So there's 79% there's 79 local government areas, and all of the local government areas have access to a library. Now there's 51 library services, which means that there are one-to-one where somewhere like Merribek, where Georgina works, has a library service, and that library service serves Merribek Council. But we have a handful of library corporations who serve 2 or 3 local government areas. So this is a map of Victoria on its side, and the little coloured dots show you where the spread of our library branches. So as I said, we have 51 library services. One of those library services is Vision Australia, and Vision Australia is the peak group that works with people who are blind and have low vision, and they have a fabulous library, so they're a member as well. So our 281 branches spread across Victoria, up in Mildura, which is in that top left-hand corner, all the way down to the Bay areas. My CEO of our state library, Paul Daldy, is very fond of saying there are more library branches in Victoria than McDonald's stores, and he's right. There's 264 McDonald's stores, so yes, libraries outnumber McDonald's. 2 million Victorians are library members, and we have 30 million visitors to public libraries every year. And as you would know, there are plenty of people in your library spaces who aren't members, but who use the library on a regular basis for the space, for the sense of safety and connection. Look, public libraries are funded in the majority by their local council. So a good 85% of their funding comes from local government, from people's rates. And the remaining percent, the 15%, is from state government. State libraries come under the direction of a state government department called Local Government Victoria. The peak body for libraries is Public Libraries Victoria, and they represent all of the library services within Victoria. So Georgina, who will speak later, is a manager of a library service, but she's also on the committee for the Public Libraries Victoria. I work for State Library Victoria. This is the building. It was established in 1851 as the Melbourne Public Library, and it is Australia's oldest public library and one of the first free public libraries in the world. And the founders of the library believed that access to information was critical for the development of a civil and prosperous community, and created the library as, and we all know this term, the People's University, a place of learning and discovery for all Victorians. They also charged the library with preserving Victoria's heritage by collecting items of historical and cultural significance for future generations. So the library is a non-lending library. You can come in, you can use a collection, but you can't borrow it and take it home. It's also a place of legal deposit. So any book published in Victoria, there needs to be a copy deposited at the State Library. And it's also the holder of Victorian history through books, manuscripts, diaries, maps, ephemera, and so on. The library has 2 million physical visits annually and 4.3 million annual online visits. Funding for the library comes predominantly from state government funding through our league department called Creative Victoria. But the library also raises money through philanthropy, through corporate sponsorships, and the commercialisation of our spaces. So you can come and get married at the library. You can have your wedding reception there. You can launch your book. You can do many things in that space. So State Library Victoria and Public Libraries Victoria have had a lot ongoing collaboration. It's been going for several decades now. Under the Library Act 1988, State Library was given the role of showing leadership in the library sector. We're not legislated to play this role. We are encouraged to take this role. We can't make public libraries do anything. So we work in collaboration and partnership, and we agree to do things together. My team, Library Sector Engagement at the State Library, is the mechanism by which we partner with Public Libraries Victoria. We have the funding and we have that project management responsibility, but we work with public libraries and together we agree on the things that we're going to focus on and the projects that we'll run. And it's really about lifting the library sector's, to use the old buzzwords, capability and capacity to be able to think about what their communities need now and into the future. We have a governance structure. We have a state library subcommittee called the Advisory Committee for Public Libraries, and they're the governance structure that meets on a quarterly basis and monitors our progress and monitors what we're doing with public funding. That group has members of the State Library Board, members from Public Libraries Victoria, and a representative from my group, and it's usually me. So the collaboration, we plan in 3-year cycles. We come together so that 3-year cycles we call trienniums, and in the last year of the triennium, we'll come together and start thinking about what we'll do for the next 3 years. We come together for a planning summit. So the photo you have was our last planning summit, and in sunny Ballarat. It was quite cold there, wasn't it, Georgina? And we plan out what needs to be done. So we're doing some work before the planning summit. We have workshops with a futurist, and we start to environmentally scan the issues that we're seeing and the things we think will be important in the coming years. We'll put a call out to the sector and say, what do you think? So we have ideas coming from the ground up. But so by the time we come to the summit, we've really had a good think about what we think is important to discuss. So for the 2020-23 triennium, when we were planning for that, health and wellbeing was really bubbling up as a topic of interest. And it was quite prescient because, you know, a year after that planning summit, we were in lockdown and COVID hit. And at that summit, we really started to recognise that the role of public libraries in health and wellbeing is important. But there was no structured way of showing this importance. There was no evidence to prove this importance. We just intrinsically know it. And as you would know it too, you know that people come into your libraries and feel better and safer being there. So we know this, but there was no evidence or data. And we had just come out of 3 years of doing advocacy work and improving our skills in advocacy. And we understood that if you want to go to your funding stakeholders, if you want to go to partners, this feeling of knowing that you do good work in health and wellbeing isn't enough. You need to show that evidence in the data, and you need to collect the stories from the community that underpins that data. So we agreed at that planning summit that Libraries for Health and Wellbeing, as we called it, would be a program of significance for 3 years. And we decided the things we wanted to do was to develop a strategic framework, and that would then give us this shared understanding of, one, the health and wellbeing sector, and two, our role in it, in supporting health and wellbeing outcomes. It would outline how public libraries operate in this space, where we operate in this space, and identify priority areas for action. So it would really embed health and wellbeing as a focus in public libraries. After the framework, we were then going to look at research to try and prove the impact that we make on health and wellbeing. We looked at professional development, so anything that would come out of the research and the framework, we would then have professional development for. And that really came out as partnerships. We really understood that if we were going to do work in health and wellbeing, partnerships with health and wellbeing organisations was going to be vital. So we did work around partnerships, and we also made available grant funding for libraries to experiment and pilot health and wellbeing programs. So I'm going to quickly take you through how the framework was developed. We went out to market. We needed a consultant. We needed experts to help develop the framework and take us through the process. And we came across a great consultant called Spark Strategy, who we really learned a great deal from in this process. They worked us hard, but it was a great learning experience. So Spark firstly did an audit of our health and wellbeing program. Sorry, no, they did consultations first. Sorry. The big part of the development of the strategic framework was having conversations, one, with the sector, and two, with experts in the field in health and wellbeing and in library land as well. So Spark took us through a group of focus groups and interviews and surveys. And yet during the focus groups, when we were able to come together, we were going in and out of lockdown at this stage. I don't know whether you know, but Melbourne was one of the most lockdown cities in the world. So we were trying to run focus groups in and out of lockdown. We managed to get a few people together safely and with masks and everything else in rooms, and start that conversation in the sector for people to start to think about what they saw the key areas were for health and wellbeing, what success might look like, where they thought we fitted in that continuum of health and wellbeing. There were also interviews with health and wellbeing partner organisations and with library thinkers such as David Lankus. He was part of the process, and asking them where they thought public libraries fit best in the health and wellbeing, what would our priority areas would be, what else the strengths and challenges for public libraries would be in supporting health and wellbeing. We also went to community members and surveyed them. We had quite a good response. Like several hundred people responded to the survey, and they were asked about the issues that they faced when they're accessing health and wellbeing support and information. We also did the state Spark Strategy did an audit of past, current, and historical health and wellbeing programs, and what libraries thought their impact were. So they were looking at what we'd done in the past, what had worked and why, and what hadn't worked and why, and what were the programs that had the most impact, and what were the ones we thought had impact but really didn't. And then they took us through a series of workshops, and they worked with the steering committee for Libraries for Health and Wellbeing, and that was the Libraries for Health and Wellbeing working group. And Georgina was part of this working group, and they worked us hard. We had quite a few workshops to attend and to really think about. One of them was an ideation workshop where we had to sit down and think about our aspirations for this framework, what we hoped the framework would do. We discussed what we thought the unique role that public libraries played within health and wellbeing, and what we thought that role would be in the coming years. We talked about the key priorities that would help public libraries achieve aspirations and deliver on their role, and then the key principles that would underpin our decision making. We also did a workshop on impact assessment. So how are we going to measure the impact of our framework and our work? And then we finally did some stress testing. So that's where we took the assumptions coming out of all the work we'd done and really thought about them and tested them against various scenarios. And out of that came the framework. So it was a lot of work, but I think we achieved a great deal. And the framework apparently is the first in the world, the first Libraries for Health and Wellbeing strategic framework. And this is our strategy on a page. I'm sorry, it didn't translate to a slide very well, but it encapsulated all the work we've done, and it really positions and is clear about where libraries sit in health and wellbeing. We're not clinicians. We're not there to diagnose. We are there to provide information and support our community to find that information and to digest it. We're there to work with partners, the experts, and provide space and access to the community. We're there to help with referrals, and provide space to our partners and to our community to explore what needs to be explored. So if you looked at the strategy, our purpose is to empower, support, and connect our communities and partners for a healthy and thriving Victoria. And it makes it quite clear where we sit and the things that we do. And if you look at the Venn diagram, that shows out the 3 impact areas that we feel libraries have can make the most impact, and that's social connection, mental wellbeing, and physical health. And I think social connection and mental wellbeing we do great work in, and we've established ourselves as being good partners for this area. Physical health is probably the one where we need to start thinking more strategically. But we're great mates with people like Noah Lenstra. We're learning a great deal about what happens in America and where we could possibly start to explore great programming and services in physical health. So I'm going to hand over to Georgina now. I'll stop sharing, and Georgina will talk about all the work and the outcomes that come from the framework. I'll stop sharing, George.
Thanks, Jackie. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Jackie. I would like to acknowledge that I am coming to you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. These lands were unceded, and they are Aboriginal lands, always were, always will be. Thank you so much for having us today. I'd like to talk a little bit about what came out of all that work that that Jackie's been telling you about. Oh no, I don't want to go right to the end of my. How about I start at the beginning instead of the end? There we go. So yes, all that work with the strategic framework brought us to a point where we had some work to do and some things that we wanted to create. One of those was this lovely strategic framework, and the next one was the partnerships toolkit, which was a more practical application of the learnings and directions that we got from the work done creating the framework. So the partnerships toolkit was a really practical, is a really practical piece of information for libraries. So we had identified in the framework that partnerships between libraries and health and wellbeing organisations were the best way to achieve better health outcomes for our communities. And creating this toolkit was aimed to give both leadership an opportunity to understand and bring their libraries in that direction and focus on health and wellbeing, and to give staff on the ground some methodologies and some practical tips and tricks for actually managing partnerships and different ways to partner and collaborate. The toolkit identified 3 priorities for action. They were increasing understanding among library leaders of the Victorian health and wellbeing landscape. I think it became clear that while libraries intrinsically know that they deliver in the health and wellbeing space, there was a little bit of a fear, I guess, or a lack of understanding of how the health sector worked. So building capacity in our leaders and our librarians to understand and feel comfortable working in that health space and reaching out to collaborate and partner in that space. We also identified a priority of finding opportunities and approaches for partnerships between libraries and health and wellbeing organisations. So actually championing really good examples and leading, taking those leading examples out to the library sector and encouraging others to follow that lead. We also wanted to define clear next steps for libraries to take to begin the process of building effective partnerships with health and wellbeing organisations. And the toolkit itself was designed to be easy to read. It was sent out so it's available online through the State Library of Victoria's website, and it's also been sent out to all public libraries in Victoria to be a useful and practical tool. So coming out of the toolkit and the framework were a range of grant programs, which Jackie alluded to earlier. So the State Library of Victoria funded 24 projects through the Libraries for Health and Wellbeing Innovation Grants. They provided an opportunity for pilot programs to be run in libraries across the state and for others to learn from the experiences through those pilot projects. Here at Marybeck, when we were formally named the City of Moreland, we had a project called From the Word Grow, which was much about that physical health component that Jackie talked about, where we sometimes struggle in libraries to connect. So we used the grant funding to actually build a program of health and wellbeing initiatives at our new library in the Glenroy Community Hub. We're a library service in the north of Melbourne, and we deal with a very diverse community, culturally and socioeconomic diversity within the community. And then the north of our city, we knew that many of our community members were suffering from food insecurity and not necessarily having access to knowledge and understanding about good eating and health strategies. So we used that money to run information sessions for community, cooking sessions, and we created a community cookbook, which is a really nice outcome from that. There were a number of really wide-ranging projects that came out of that grant funding. We recently highlighted in an online seminar called Small Libraries, Big Impact, some really great rural programs that we're running. And I think as well as running the grants, which were great for any of the libraries who were successful in getting grants, it was about talking about the outcomes of those and sharing the learnings so that others might be able to save some of that early work and come in at a point where they had done the learning with us. Another part of the work that came out of the framework was the Health and Wellbeing Benefits of Public Libraries Across Victoria document. It's quite a long title. I haven't read it out before, but it's long title, but great content. This also is available by the State Library of Victoria's website if you want to have a look at it. The intent of this piece of work was to arm our library leaders with some solid evidence. So if you're convincing funding bodies or trying to collaborate and partner with health and wellbeing organisations, this document should give you the information that you need. So it was we engaged SGS, a company that we've used before, to do economic kind of planning, and I would say the learning from this part of the work was that we needed to be really clear about what we wanted to get out of this part of the project and what we were going to use that information for. Because to my mind, we needed really short, sharp pieces of information that we could share for advocacy and use, in those elevator pitches, when you're stuck in the lift. Does that ever happen when you're stuck in the lift with someone who holds the purse strings and you want to be able to say, here are some key pieces of evidence? There was a survey that was conducted to create that document, and it did come out with some really useful little grabs of information, such as 79% of respondents said that the library is a place where I can feel safe or belong. 47% said the library helps me to maintain my physical health, which I think is a pretty impressive number considering we feel that's an area that we're not achieving in as highly as we'd like to. And 73% of respondents said the library helps me to feel connected to my community. So that was a great document, and it's one that I use regularly when talking with my director or funding bodies, and it's one that we use when we're trying to link into new partnerships and collaborations. Now I'm going to try and play a bit of a little video here. Hopefully it will work. And
So the purpose of Art Connection is for people with disability, including myself, to connect through the act of art making. So we might have conversations about what we're making and tell stories about our lives and tell stories for our art and just reduce social isolation and come together through art. It's wonderful.
So with Art Connection, we do like a warm-up. We put like relaxing music on and we do whatever we want with our art. We're not here to judge anyone. The people that are also doing the art, they're really nice people, they're friendly. You feel comfortable, like you don't feel shy, you don't feel embarrassed or anything. Like you feel comfortable.
Typically when people join the Art Connection, they might be a bit nervous at first, they might be a bit apprehensive about their art ability, which we totally wash away as soon as we can. And it's been really lovely to see the friendships develop over time and how people have started to really support each other to talk about lots of different issues and things going on in their lives. And I feel like my role now as a facilitator a lot of the time is just to step back and allow them to all to connect. And I just provide the space and hopefully a bit of structure to allow everyone to connect and have fun making art.
Every single time I come here, I'm happy to come here because it takes my mind off from the outside world and I'm just concentrating and socializing here with the rest of the girls.
so I just wanted to play that as an example of a program that I think Marybeck Libraries, although we didn't create that with a grant from the Health and Wellbeing program, that was an area that we felt we had capacity to move into a disability service area and build social connection for people living with a disability because of the work that had happened to build our capacity and our confidence through the Health and Wellbeing program. So some other examples of areas where libraries have been able to contribute is in the libraries and physical health space. Some of the grant programs that were created there were, for example, one of our libraries ran a program called Healthy Me, Healthy Planet, which whilst it looked at sustainability, it also integrated physical health components into that program. Libraries for mental health is an area where libraries across the state have contributed. One of our rural libraries ran a program called around grit and resilience, so building that resilience in the community. Another rural library ran a program called No More Dr. Google about men's health and finding quality information and support to maintain your health. We've also introduced library social workers, something that I know the United States have been doing for a long time, but we're kind of new to this space. But Melbourne, Yarra and Marybeck libraries have introduced library social workers onto their teams, and we're having great success with that program. So I'd like to thank you for your time and perhaps throw back to the team to see if there are any questions.
Oh, Jackie and Georgina, thank you so much. Georgina, thank you for that video. That was fantastic to see folks that are participating in programs and just the energy and light coming through their faces as they talk about the programs. Like, how wonderful is that? That must make you feel so good.
It's a beautiful program. And, I'm particularly proud of that one because we started it with seed funding and we've continued it now. It's part of our business as usual operation and we run it on two sites. So fantastic joy from that.
So I've got a couple of questions for you if you're willing to hang out a little longer and chat with me. So
sure.
what do you say to people that come, they see what you're doing with these well-being programs and physical health programs, and does anyone ever say to you, that doesn't look like what a library does? What do you say to that?
We do get that a little bit. We run Tai Chi classes in our Glenroy Library at lunchtime, which gets a lovely array of people attending. And sometimes people will say, I never thought I'd see this happening in the library. They never say, stop doing that, but they might say, I never thought I'd see that in the library. So it's usually an interesting, quite positive conversation in that, no, you didn't. And did you know that we also do walking book clubs and we have yoga on a Thursday night when the library's open till 10 o'clock. It's kind of, I see it as an opportunity to enjoy that slight disconnect and say, yeah, but why not? Yeah.
Jackie, do you have to confront that issue in government and administrative issues?
Not at this point. Not at this point. I think what we do is take the opportunity to say, look at what we're doing and we can help you with these things. So take that opportunity to say, when you convene meetings around community health, early years literacy, community development, libraries need to be there too. So it's an opportunity to say, look at what we do, look at how we can help you as a state government achieve your priorities. So no, we haven't had anyone say, why are you doing that yet? Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, I think it really ties into the whole idea of education has to fit all sizes. And when you think about the ability for folks to engage with each other and learn from one another, it really does make a lot of sense about the platform we provide to create environments that people can come together and learn together or create something new together, which is so exciting. So Jackie, something you said early on kind of caught my attention, and I'm wondering if I can ask you to reach back in your memory, because you were talking about when you convened the library community together and kind of identifying which programs had the most impact and which ones librarians thought had impact but didn't. What were some
I'll have to go back into research, Rebecca, sorry.
So I
do remember Georgina. Yeah.
Doesn't that happen? Like, we all think we're doing an amazing job. We have amazing intentions to do good work. And then every once in a while, we're like, I don't think this is connecting. Have you had some of those events where you're like, let's move on from that and really focus?
Georgina, you might have better to answer that question.
I think we didn't have so many examples where we thought, oh, that's not actually working or that's not delivering for the community. But we did have to be quite selective because we can only have so many triennial projects. We had to really prioritize. So if something, there might have been examples of, I think there was some early literacy and some other items where we do well and we kick goals, sorry, that's a very Australian term. We already, have
touchdowns.
Success. Yeah, touchdowns. Okay. We already have success in that area. But there were spaces where we saw capacity to build what we were doing and making that a priority as opposed to perhaps some of the other areas. And prioritising is always hard. So that gathering of the library leaders that Jackie referred to, there was some quite robust discussion around what the priorities should be. But the health and wellbeing being one of the priorities, libraries for Aboriginal people being another priority. And Jackie, what was the third one? I forget.
Oh, future ready.
Future ready. Thank you. So choosing three is actually a really hard thing to do, and you do need to think strategically about where we can build capacity, where we can deliver, and where we can expand what we're doing and grow the library services.
Sometimes it was less about the program itself, but the way, where and when we ran it. Maybe it's the wrong time of the day, maybe it's the wrong audience that we're targeting. Sometimes there are little things around the edges where we can make improvements. and the way you market and the way you reach out to people and who you partner with. Sometimes things are better off where you invite a partner in and they use the space rather than us trying to run programs and trying to take on a role that's not really ours.
Have there been interesting partnerships that have emerged thanks to this
Yeah.
strategic priority?
Yeah, there's a state not-for-profit organisation called Vic Health, and they're the leads of health promotion organisation in Victoria. And when we ran the grants, we ran 3 rounds of grants, and we always ask an external organisation who are experts in the field to come and be on assessment panels when we assess the grants that are submitted. So not everyone gets money. It's a process of looking at the most strategic projects. We invited Vic Health onto the assessment panel, and that was a strategic choice. They're a big organisation and they're very well funded. So we invited them onto assessment panel, and the woman who sat on that first assessment panel was astounded by the breadth of the work we do. And we ended up in partnership with Vic Health. They approached us and said their big strategic focuses at the moment are young people, so 25 and under, particularly in that young teens, young adult stage. They're very big on co-design as well. And so inviting those young people in to develop approaches. So we went to them with a couple of ideas, 2 ideas in particular, and as Georgina said, early years literacy, that's our wheelhouse. Libraries do early years really well. How can we use early years literacy programming to promote good health? And the other part where we a bit hit and miss is that youth area. How can we work with young people in the areas, particularly mental health and social connection? And Vic Health, of course, went for that one, which is good because it pushed us. So we put expressions of interest out to libraries. We wanted 2 rural and regional libraries, 2 metro libraries. And the project was about co-design with young people to develop programs and services that welcome young people into the libraries and develop and support their mental health.
Oh.
Yeah. So we went through that process, and we provided training. We went out to market and found trainers to provide some cultural diversity type training, and then co-design training, and then to help them through the process of bringing young people in, recruiting them, working with them, and developing programs to offer to young people within communities. So yeah, that out of that came $200,000 to do some work.
That's really phenomenal, because there's a lot of layers there to what you produced in that one program, right? To not only get the young folks engaged, but designing in a manner that really builds the community they envision for the future. What does that look like? And I always remember in Library Journal, and Rebecca Miller was the editor, and she always talked about inviting children to the table to co-design with us, because these issues that we're contending with are so enormous and so overwhelming. We need everybody to help out with this, and even some maybe non-traditional folks to help us figure out what's going on. And so empowering younger people to be part of that's so important.
Yeah, it is. And I think traditionally, like, librarians have thought, oh, we'll decide what the young people want. We'll do book clubs and we'll do this and we'll do that, and wonder why no one turns up because we hadn't asked them. And I know from asking them, sometimes they just want to be left alone. You don't need to do anything. We just need the space. So yeah.
Isn't it funny, like how sometimes it's just so simple? Just ask them.
Yeah, go and talk to them. Not scary. They're quite funny.
Have you gotten more attention from other partners, people who are seeking you out now that they see perhaps the role of a library in a different light thanks to this work?
Yeah,
I think I've definitely seen that, Jackie. Yeah, we've definitely seen that at Mary Beck. So we work with our community health providers in the area, and it always used to be us approaching them, and now we're finding more often they're coming to us and saying, can you partner with us on this? And that's great. But I think one that I think Jackie actually might have had a little hand in this one. I was contacted by Dental Health Victoria. Myself and another library leader were contacted by Dental Health Victoria because they wanted to work with us on embedding dental hygiene into a storytime program and co-creating that with public libraries. And then they created a kit and provided that to us so that we could deliver those programs out of every public library in Victoria, including a fairly scary little puppet that's got human teeth in it. And you demonstrate how to clean its teeth. It was quite Yeah, yes, but it was a lovely outcome, and especially for areas like Marybeck, where we have a real lack of understanding and access to dental health and dental hygiene products. So that was a great a small example, but for them to actually approach libraries rather than libraries going to them cap in hand shows me that bit by bit this framework is actually adding value. And what about you, Jackie? Have you seen anything at the state library level?
Nothing. I think we tend to do more of the directing them off to public libraries, so it's less for us. We don't do the programming we do at State Library. There's the early years we do, story time, but then it's more about that high level strategic conversation. So policy pitches and important think tanks coming to use our space to talk about different things. So probably we could think more about attracting health and wellbeing experts into the space to talk about things. So that's something for me to think about. Thank you.
Would you say you've issued any new library cards thanks to the strategic priorities you've chosen that maybe are bringing some new people into your spaces?
I don't know. What do you think, Georgina?
I would think yes, because whenever our librarians are well schooled in every time someone new comes into the building, whatever it's for. So if they're coming in for Tai Chi at lunchtime, have you joined up yet? Let me join you on the spot. So I think we're very, very skilled at attracting people into the building and actually then getting them to join up. I would say some of the people that have come to our health and wellbeing programs would be people who would not have crossed our threshold for the standard library product. But then once they're in, you can let them know how the standard library product is not the standard library product anymore. Here's all the new and exciting things that libraries do and deliver for you. So, I would definitely say, I mean, it's not quantifiable, but I would say yes would be the answer for most libraries.
I think that I think you're, Rebecca, there are people who end up joining up. One of the funded projects we did that Georgina talked about, No More Dr. Google, we had well-established Rebecca McGowan ran sessions with men in a particular rural area called Indigo in Victoria. And these were gentlemen of various ages who had never stepped in libraries before, but they came because they saw it as a safe space. There's no label at the front saying health centre, it's a library. And they came to learn about the things they need to think about now that they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. So those gentlemen, there's a great video that shows that program. Those gentlemen then went, oh, there's books here. I can read about diabetes or chronic health or chronic pain. I just need to join up. So yes, they recruited a whole bunch of rural older men into their libraries.
Mm-hmm. So
and I think we've probably got the reverse happening as well, where at Marybeck we have a lot of women in our local community who see the library as a safe space and perhaps don't have freedom to attend other services in the community, but libraries are seen as a safe space for them. And we're running a kind of under the radar domestic violence prevention program with those women. So seeing both people who wouldn't have come in before getting library cards and those with library cards getting more than they expected, I think both of those things are happening out of this.
So something I have always admired about the work, Jackie, of the State Library is the marketing chops you folks have, because you tell the story so well. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you make sure that you're not just doing good work in a vacuum that no one understands is happening in libraries, because your stuff is polished, it's well produced, the print materials look fabulous. Is that part of your strategy to make sure your storytelling is a component of this program?
Yeah. As I said, we, in the 2017 to 2020 triennium, the main focus was advocacy. And we developed, Georgina and I got the T-shirts, Library Street.
I was hoping you were going to show those.
We developed an advocacy campaign, and through those 3 years, we took on a consultant group who were specialists in communications and public relations, one to help us make links with state government and to develop those relationships and to help us produce our first ever budget submissions to government, but also to develop our storytelling capacity. And those 3 years, we learned so much. So we stopped being quiet little librarians who did great work but that no one ever read. And we've got amazing research products from previous decades, but no one read them. No one knew about them, but they were really good. So in these 3 years, it was really about, one, lifting our profile, and two, lifting our voices and saying, this is what we do. We want to sit at the table every time you talk about early years literacy, community development, all those areas that we excel in. So it came off the back of 3 years of learning, Rebecca, and learning how to find the stories and to start to produce those digital stories like Georgina showed you. So now that when we give out grant funding, we also say, okay, what are you going to do with this? You're going to produce any material? Are you going to do a digital stories? And digital stories are great. You can do little snappy ones and put them on Instagram and on LinkedIn and on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. But so we learned a great deal from CPR. They had a social media expert Liz, who has now joined Libraryland and has worked for several library services. She's left CPR, but she was great at, if you're going on Instagram, it needs to look like this. It needs to be this long. If you're using Facebook, you need to do this. This is how you can count how many people have looked at it and viewed it. So we really, really developed our capacity to advocate, one, to community, to our partners, and to our funders.
Jackie, did you say that you actually, when you're awarding grants to libraries, part of their application or the pitch they make to you has to include, how are you going to market this?
How are you going to do this? Yeah, definitely.
And
we've gotten better at that.
Yeah, we were supported to get into that space too, weren't we, Jackie? There was a program of funding, small grants where you could apply for funding to create a video that was, a short video like the one I showed that we could share on Insta or on socials in other ways. And I think it was, sharing that knowledge so that the State Library didn't hold on to that advocacy and keep it all to themselves. They shared that out amongst the public libraries and we all built capacity and understood that that's part of the job.
Yeah. That advocacy is part and parcel of what you do. So every time you do something, who are we going to tell? How are we going to get this message out? What are the stories we're going to tell? Yeah.
So I wish you had told me you were wearing your t-shirts tonight, because I could have worn my pins that I got from your friends when we met up in Denmark for another library conference, because they had all this great bling, saying libraries change lives. And I'm like, I have this sign over my desk back in Poughkeepsie, New York that say libraries change lives. That's pretty cool. So I really admire the work you've done to be cohesive in your messaging and to raise the profile and to speak proudly about the work that you're doing and what it contributes to the community. It's just really, really impressive.
We've learned a lot, and we've gotten a lot better, and we've stopped being quiet librarians and become loud ones.
Well, I'm glad. I'm so cool. I think it's great to have you end on that note, because that's part of the work, right? We do such good work, but a lot of us are not. I always describe it as being chronically humble. We do good work and we go about our business, right? But we've got to brag more. We've got to really hold it up for people to understand how smart the choices we are making. Georgina, when you were talking about how tough it was to get down to those 3 strategic priorities, there's so much thought that went into the choices that you've made. And you've been so methodical about focusing on what matters and doing so within your capacity. I think that's the other impressive thing about what I hear you talking about, is that it wasn't really its introduction of new, or perhaps something that looks different to others, but you've worked it into the plan of service of this is what this library is about now, which I think is another part of the work, is respecting the capacity of the staff and the institution itself.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's no point. Yes, stretch targets are great, but if the stretch targets are too far away and they're just not within the capacity of the libraries, then you set yourself up for failure.
Was there any work you had to do, Georgina, to kind of sell it to your staff, or everyone was like, we get it, we understand why we're doing this work, let's go?
Look, I think at the beginning, yes, there was a little bit of work to say this is library business, this is what we do. But I think that the proof was also in the success of the programming. People coming in. I mean, we had an afternoon recently where we had a chatty cafe running. We had a group of disabled teenagers using our space for an activity. We had another group of teenagers using the podcasting facilities, and we had Art Connection happening in the maker space. and the place was just buzzing, and the staff just pick up on that and go, oh, this is good. Like, okay, I don't think anyone there was reading a book. That's okay. They're all doing really, really good library stuff and understanding that it's ours. So you kind of have to take the plunge maybe a little bit before everyone's on board and be ready to bring them along with you.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I'm so excited that we got a chance to have you as part of our webinar series, because I think you're modeling excellent, not only I think priority behavior, of course, but just the logistics of how you carry things out and how smart you are about telling the story of what's going on here has to be part of the work that we're doing. Because I just look around at the work from the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, and one of the big barriers is, how do we tell this story? So the work that's happened at your state library to provide this cohesive priorities, that you're methodically working for them, you're investing money, time, and energy in things that really matter for the people that you serve. You truly are changing people's lives. And we just want to give you a high five from across the way and say thank you for what you're doing.
I want to add too, sorry, Rebecca, we're doing another 3 years of health and wellbeing work, and you touched on this in your opening presentation. We'll be looking at loneliness and social connection. That's our big research piece. Looking at that epidemic of loneliness, starting with the US, Surgeon General's pronouncement, which was great. Great timing for us.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And it goes back to that simplistic kind of thinking of, what if we just got together as neighbors and really thought about what it's like to be a community, and libraries are the perfect catalyst for that. So you folks have really positioned yourself well for work that is going to matter so much to people in your area. So really congratulations to what you're doing. And thank you so much for your time. This has been fabulous.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, folks, we'll talk to you later. And thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.